You think McDonald's invented the double-decker burger with the Big Mac? It didn't. It copied the idea from a Ten-Stool hamburger stand run by a man his high school voted least likely to succeed. In 1937, Bob Wian sliced a bun into three and stacked two patties and accidentally created a burger that would conquer America. At its peak, his empire had nearly 1,000 restaurants. Today, barely 60 remain. You will discover how one double-decker burger started a fast food revolution, how Bob's Big Boy grew into a beloved coast-to-coast institution, and how it nearly disappeared completely. And by the end, you will learn the bitter irony. The burger Bob Wian invented is now eaten billions of times a year, but almost never under his name. It all starts with a man who sold his only car for $300. This is the rise and fall of an American institution. How does the man who invented America's most copied burger end up nearly erased from the menu? In the summer of 1933, Robert Wian graduated from Glendale High School with a yearbook entry that labeled him the student least likely to succeed. His classmates saw nothing remarkable in him. Wian possessed a quiet, deliberate curiosity about the food trade. He started at the very bottom, scrubbing grease off plates at the White Log coffee shop for $12 a week. Rather than merely collecting a paycheck, he treated each shift as an apprenticeship. He migrated from sink to flat-top grill, learning how to pace orders and coordinate curb service at a drive-in called the Right Spot. By studying the friction between hungry customers and harried cooks, he began to understand the hidden mechanics of a successful kitchen. Every dollar saved from his meager wages went toward a singular, unspoken ambition. He only needed a single piece of leverage to prove his classmates wrong, and it sat parked in his driveway. That leverage was a 1934 DeSoto Roadster. In August 1936, Wian sold the vehicle for $300. It was a painful sacrifice for a young man, but hard cash was the only language the landlord understood. He squeezed another $50 from his father, Robert, to buy his first sacks of flour, buns, and ground beef. This meager treasury secured the lease on a run-down, Ten-Stool hamburger stand at 900 East Colorado Street in Glendale. The building was a narrow wooden box sandwiched between a flower nursery and a liquor store. It was filthy. Wian spent days scrubbing years of accumulated grease off the counter before hanging a modest sign that read, "Bob's Pantry." He had no Carhops, no flashing lights, and zero room for error. A handful of quiet afternoons would sink the entire operation. He stood behind the hot, flat-top grill, spatula in hand, waiting for the one unusual customer order that would push his tiny kitchen to its absolute limit. One midnight in February 1937, the door of the pantry swung open, letting in a boisterous group of musicians from the Glendale High School Orchestra. They wanted something different. Tired of the standard thin Depression-era hamburger, they challenged the young cook behind the grill to make something massive. Wian had to improvise. Instead of merely stacking extra meat on a standard bun, which would make the bread soggy and the structure collapse, he grabbed a sesame seed bun and sliced it twice, creating 3 distinct layers. On the hot flat top, he seared 2 thin beef patties. He laid the first patty on the bottom heel, capped it with a slice of American cheese, shredded lettuce, and pickles, then pressed the middle bun down to act as a structural deck. On top of that, he placed the second patty, a spoonful of sweet, mayonnaise-based relish sauce, and the crown. He handed over the creation. It was the world's first double-decker hamburger, a towering, balanced architecture of beef and bread, born of late-night pressure. But a sandwich this distinctive now needed an identity the neighborhood would never forget. A chubby 6-year-old named Richard Woodruff regularly wandered into the Glendale stand. He swept the floors. In return, Wian fed him. When the boy walked through the door, Wian would call out, "Hey, big boy!" The nickname clung to the towering new hamburger. Now the sandwich had a name, but it needed a face. One afternoon in 1937, Ben Washam, a regular customer and a talented animator for Warner Brothers, watched the kid eat. Washam grabbed a paper napkin. With a few quick strokes of his pen, he sketched a grinning, round-faced boy wearing checkered overalls, holding the double-decker high. It was a trade for a free lunch. Wian recognized the shorthand power of that caricature immediately. In 1938, he retired the name Bob's Pantry and painted his new mascot onto the building. Bob's Big Boy was born. The modest stand became a destination, anchored by a smiling face that welcomed every driver on East Colorado Street. But as the crowd swelled, Wian realized his single Glendale counter could no longer hold the ambition of this cartoon child. In 1938, Wian opened a second drive-in at 4211 West Riverside Drive in Burbank. This sprawling, neon-lit hub captured the raw energy of Southern California's emerging car culture. Carhops marched across the hot asphalt, clipping heavy window trays loaded with double-deckers directly onto the doors of parked sedans. Almost overnight, the parking lot became a teenage coliseum. Kids idled their customized hot rods under the night sky, gossiping, flirting, and playing music. It was a weekly social ritual. The restaurant was a sanctuary of chrome and grease, where the hum of car engines blended with the sizzle of the grill. Seeking to cement this bond with young families, the brand expanded from the parking lot into print. In 1956, the company launched a promotional comic book called The Adventures of the Big Boy, distributed free to young diners. A young writer named Stan Lee, decades before co-creating Spider-Man, penned the initial run of these colorful pages. Lee's stories anchored the round-faced boy in checkered overalls in the imaginative lives of millions of American children. Wian had created more than a restaurant. He had built a cultural habit that defined a generation. Yet transforming this intense local devotion into a coast-to-coast empire would soon force him to make a difficult choice, letting complete strangers run his business under the Big Boy banner. Wian secured a national trademark for the Big Boy name in 1938, but he lacked the capital to build a coast-to-coast empire on his own. His solution was a remarkably generous licensing model. He charged a modest flat fee and a tiny royalty on sales, making partnership irresistible. Instead of forcing operators to erase their local reputations, Wian allowed them to keep their original restaurant names alongside the Big Boy brand. David Frisch in Cincinnati signed on in 1947, bringing the double-decker to his drive-ins. In the South, Alex Schoenbaum did the same, linking his Shoney's restaurants to the growing network. Dozens of other operators followed, from Eaton Park in Pittsburgh to Azar's in Colorado. It was a chain of chains. This loose system turned hometown familiarity into a powerful growth engine, eventually swelling the mascot's footprint to nearly 1,000 locations across 38 states. Yet this massive structure depended on a fragile foundation of handshake agreements and local pride. Wian held the trademark, but he did not own the physical land, the local buildings, or the absolute obedience of his partners. He had built an empire of independent barons who could easily walk away, and other ambitious fast food pioneers were already studying how to copy his blueprint. The triple-deck architecture born in a Ten-Stool Glendale diner had quietly become the blueprint for the modern American hamburger. Wian soon watched his blueprint conquered. In April 1967, a McDonald's franchisee in Uniontown, Pennsylvania named Jim Delegati began testing a new sandwich. It featured 2 thin beef patties, lettuce, cheese, pickles, and a sweet mayonnaise-based sauce, all separated by a central slice of bread. When this Big Mac rolled out nationally, it became an overnight empire, effectively erasing the Glendale origin from the public mind. Delegati was candid about the design's origin. He later remarked that his creation was not like discovering the light bulb, because the bulb was already there and he only screwed it in. Other chains rushed to copy the copycat. Virtually every major competitor developed a direct clone to stay relevant on the highway. From Burger Chef's Big Chef to dozens of regional knockoffs, the fast food industry standardized Wian's double-decker layout while pushing its creator into the margins. With his creation now common property and his loose franchise network growing more difficult to control, Wian faced a mounting pressure that would soon force him to make an irreversible deal. In 1967, Bob Wian signed over his empire. Marriott paid $7 million to absorb the entire Big Boy system. The hotel giant acquired 22 company-owned restaurants and roughly 500 franchises across 38 states. Underneath the real estate holdings lay a sprawling, highly delicate brand architecture, a loose network that had grown too large for its own security. It was fragile. This empire of independent barons relied entirely on personal handshakes and local autonomy. Wian briefly stayed on to ease the corporate takeover, hoping to preserve the roadhouse culture he had nurtured since the mid-1930s. He soon realized his informal, roadside logic could never survive inside a corporate boardroom in Bethesda, Maryland. Walking away completely, Wian left the brand's future in corporate hands and trusted them to protect his legacy. Yet once the founder stepped aside, every future conflict would be decided by executives who had never fried a burger or swept a Glendale floor. Corporate headquarters in Maryland viewed the sprawling Carhop empire through the cold lens of spreadsheets. Out on the suburban asphalt, consumer habits were shifting. Hungry families wanted fast indoor dining in drive-through windows, leaving the classic drive-in format exposed to the elements. Marriott executives hesitated. They failed to update the aging structures. Meanwhile, nimble competitors built streamlined, high-speed drive-thrus that attracted the next generation of diners. The regional barons grew restless. In 1972, Pittsburgh-based Eaton Park refused to pay escalating fees and abandoned the franchise network entirely. Shoney's soon followed, stripping the Big Boy name from hundreds of highly profitable southern locations. These sudden defections tore the nationwide map apart, exposing the weakness of a system built on handshakes. Marriott was left managing a shrinking, fragmented brand that was losing its physical footprint to faster rivals. The corporate parent needed a desperate, last-ditch reinvention to stop the bleeding. Marriott's answer to the crisis was to strip away the very elements that had made the brand a roadside destination. In the late 1970s, corporate planners abandoned the drive-in aesthetic entirely to chase the suburban family dining market, testing a sterile, carpeted concept called Bob's Family Restaurant in select California markets. The mascot vanished. The double-decker was sidelined. Diners met this unrecognizable brand with total indifference, forcing executives to scrap the experiment after 2 unprofitable years. This was not a renewal of Bob Wian's formula. It was corporate disengagement. Rather than modernizing the classic drive-ins, Marriott began quietly shutting down dozens of company-owned locations to protect their quarterly balance sheets, stripping the brand of its physical footprint. They wanted out. In 1987, Marriott handed the entire fractured Big Boy system to the Elias brothers, a Michigan-based franchisee that had operated under the mascot's banner since the early days. The Maryland hotel giant successfully cleared its books, leaving the new owners to rebuild a coast-to-coast empire without its original engine. But the Elias brothers inherited a house of cards, and their aggressive plan to save it would instead push the entire brand toward a final, ruinous reckoning. In Warren, Michigan, the Elias brothers attempted to run a coast-to-coast empire from a Midwestern suburb, but the math quickly turned against them. During the late 1990s, they aggressively bought up struggling regional restaurant chains. The strategy backfired. Instead of expanding their footprint, they choked the parent company under $150 million of high-interest debt. Cash reserves vanished overnight. On October 21, 2000, Elias Brothers Corporation filed for Chapter 11, bankruptcy protection. Within months, operators shuttered more than 100 locations, wiping out nearly a third of the remaining network and leaving hundreds of empty dining rooms in their wake. The ruins were sold off to a lone Michigan investor. This salvage operation did not save the unified brand, but rather initiated a brutal geographic partition that would pit the remaining operators against one another. The 2001 legal settlement sliced the trademark in two, giving Frisch's exclusive rights to Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky, while a separate ownership group retained the rest of the country. The map broke. This partition finalized a decades-long physical erasure of Robert Wian's roadside legacy. The original Ten-Stool Stand at 900 East Colorado Street in Glendale, where the first double-decker was flipped in 1937, had already been bulldozed in 1971 to make way for a strip mall pharmacy. Today, the once massive coast-to-coast empire has shrunk to about 60 remaining locations. Most of those units operate in Michigan. Only a tiny handful survive in Southern California, anchored by the Burbank Drive-In on Riverside Drive. Here, in the corner booth, where the Beatles sat in August 1965, cooks still stack the original double-decker on the hot, flat-top grill. Bob Wian's three-tiered architecture of beef and bread is eaten billions of times every year, as the Big Mac and other clones. The layout conquered the global arena of fast food. The brand lost its anchor. The smiling boy in checkered overalls has faded into a scattered regional memory, leaving the creator's name almost entirely forgotten by the very culture he helped feed. Today, the double-decker hamburger is a global default, sold by the billions under golden arches and corporate crowns. But the boy in the checkered overalls is gone. We live in the world Bob Wian built, even if we forgot his name. His design conquered the earth. The empire itself crumbled under the weight of its own creation. What's your favorite roadside memory? Let us know in the comments.